And so 3, 2, 1, and we're live, Scott. How's it
All
going?
right. Good, good.
How you doing, man? Everything okay?
Doing great. Hey, thank you so much.
Hey, no,
Really
my
appreciate it.
pleasure that you took the time to talk to me. I have like a billion questions for you because these are questions that people ask me all the time,
Nice.
and eventually we'll get to your story. But I'm very excited to have you here because you're probably in this field one of a kind. Just to give you a little heads up, I have a screen with which I'm monitoring everything that is going on the stream. It's at the bottom, so if I look like I'm not paying attention, it's because I'm looking at the other screen. I have a couple of questions that I prepared
Yeah,
for
yeah,
you,
go ahead.
but I'll just keep them as a sort of like a guideline, rather. I
Yeah,
want for these conversations to be as organic as possible because I think that, we need a little bit more honesty, so to say, especially
yeah,
when talking about, the field, the business side of this beautiful field. Uh,
absolutely.
Scott Baumberger, guys, how are you? It's weird,
It's awesome.
right? Then when people say your name online,
Especially when they get it right. They usually don't get it right the first time, so that's pretty cool.
but I did, right?
You did. You nailed it.
Okay, there you go. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing really well. Thanks. How are
So,
you?
yeah,
I mean,
it's fine, like I miss hugging people.
yeah.
It's weird, right? I mean, one would never think of saying something like I miss hugging people. Also because it sounds very creepy.
Maybe a little bit. Yeah, it's weird. I feel like I've talked to more people, over the last couple of weeks, and emails and chats and things like this, but haven't actually, you know, shaken a hand or, just been in the same room with somebody for, close to 2 months now. So it's weird.
Yeah, I know. Hopefully soon this
Yeah,
will be behind us. Hopefully, I say, because,
I hope so.
who knows. But anyway, Scott, you and I are
Yeah,
having
I'm
this
excited for it.
conversation because you're a veteran. Am I allowed to say veteran or does it carry any
Yeah,
negative connotation?
I've fought a few battles, so sure.
Once, I don't remember who it was. I think it was Matthew Bannister. He said, "Yeah,
Yep.
veteran dinosaur."
Soon to be extinct.
You've been in the business of making architectural visualization for what, 25 years?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. I've been doing 3D modeling for 30 years, and the first like actual like commercial renderings were like 92, 93.
Oh my god.
So yeah,
That
it's
is
it's
almost 30
changed.
years.
It has changed so much.
What okay, when you say
Yeah.
it has changed so much, what
Mm-hmm.
are some of the
Well,
things that, pop to your head when you say it has changed a lot?
yeah, well, I think that certain things haven't changed. I think that's probably the funniest part. Computers still crash. We still run out of memory. We still try to do more than we possibly can. But which changes, I think, just the scope of what we can do. And our expectation. And back in those those early days, I guess, of it, we were just dazzled by the technology and what was possible. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time doing things traditionally, laying out perspectives and doing, kind of manual, technical drawing. But I did enough of it to appreciate the work that the computer was doing, even, you know, 20 plus years ago, and recognizing how much more quickly we can get, from point A to point B with these tools, and how freeing that was. Just even at the beginning, um, just you could explore so many different options, spinning the camera around and having those the ability to do that just opened up so many new possibilities. It just used to be so much more tedious.
You've been on your own for the whole entirety of the ride, right?
I've been out on my own for 20 years now.
20
Yeah.
years, okay.
Uh-huh.
Still going strong.
Hanging in there. Yeah. Ups and downs.
What were
Yeah,
some
but
of the biggest challenges that you had to face as a one-man show?
well, I think that just getting started was really hard. And I think that you ask anybody who in a similar situation, they would agree. It took the better part of 2 years to really get into the groove of it, figure out what it is that you're doing, how to do it, how to get paid, and how much to charge, and still eat. I had benefit of having sort of been on the other side of the table. I had been in house for many years prior, so I had already knew what the inside of an architect and developers' offices, what they looked like, what they expected, what they were wanting, when they called you. And so that helped me a lot in the beginning, but it still took a fair amount of time just to work it out and find your own voice. It was maybe a smaller pond back then, but you still need to kind of find your own inner artist.
I mean, if you put it in perspective, you say it took me like 2 years to figure it out, and then you look at
Yeah.
the successful career that you had, the successful run. This is really nothing, right? And I'm
Yeah.
I'm saying this because a lot of people come to me and they would like to have it figured out in a couple of months. A lot of people reach out because they feel confused or because they think that they could do better, and of course in certain cases they could, but like thinking of the fact that it took you 2 years to get you to where you wanted to be and then have a 20 years career doesn't seem to me like a bad deal, right?
No, not at all. Well, you get to call the shots, and I'll say up front, it's not for everyone. Um, and I worked at home for those years, and so so moving back home is like not that new a thing for me, but it was a big shock at the time, having come from a bunch of big large offices. So I had to just uh, I really liked the freedom of being able to organize my work the way I wanted it to. All the kind of frustrations and things that I'd run into in other people's offices, I got to kind of shortcut all of that. So that was a lot of fun. It was exciting, um, but um, but I wasn't charging enough, and so I learned that right off the bat. I was charging like $400 or $500 for a rendering. It's like I was in New York, and it's like, this is not going to pencil out. I need to be doing like 10 of these a week to make this go. So, you sort of, you make all those mistakes, and you hopefully get them out of the way as quickly as possible.
Okay, so was there somebody, a person, or any episode specifically that made you understand, okay, this is the time for me to sort of like change my prices and start charging more? How did you manage to snap out of this situation?
Yeah, well, I think it was, it's getting out ahead of the problem and going out and finding those clients and not sort of sitting back and waiting for them to come to you. You can't just have a website and a phone number and you're not going to get good clients that way. You got to go out and get them. And so I had a number of relationships that I was able to tap into. I worked at KPF, and they were one of my first clients. I had interviewed at a bunch of other offices in New York, and they ended up being some of my early clients. So, but I went out and really hit it hard in that first year or so, reconnecting with them, saying, "Hey, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I can offer." And let's go.
Now, probably this question it's not going to fit your persona, and I apologize in advance, but
No.
looking at the current market,
Yeah.
we have so many people that, work from remote, from countries where, the economy might not be as strong as the one from the US. And so
Hmm.
they don't have the chance to, say, travel and go hunt for those clients in first person. Do you have
Yeah.
any tips for those guys who are trying to establish their business without having the possibility to go out there and build those relationships firsthand?
Yeah, it's tough. It's a little bit of a different world. And I really put a lot of weight on those relationships, the personal relationships. And, till very recently, I made a point of traveling to my clients even today, maintaining that personal connection, because that's what it is. Almost all of my work is through repeat clients. And so some of these relationships go back 15, 20 years now. So it's tough. It's a big barrier. And I think that, some of the other talks that we've had, you said, you need to, as an artist, go to where the work is. And it makes a big difference. I'd say if you were in a different market, um, if you were in a smaller market, make the most of what you have. Uh, you know, uh,
Optimize what you have already.
exactly.
But
Start
I
at the
guess,
university. Who are the biggest, best offices nearby? Start small and work up.
and also I
Yeah.
guess that, like, if you have sort of like big plans for your company,
Hmm.
maybe you should not invest in, say, 100 extra nodes, but rather take that money, travel to New York, and go and see those clients who have given you work until now, right? Because
Absolutely.
I feel
Yeah.
like there is also so much pressure when we talk about research and development, that research and development needs to happen within the four walls of a design company, when actually you can develop a way to put your team together and make them more efficient as human beings, improve their
Yeah.
communication, or even improving the relationships with your own customers. To me, there was a very interesting story that I read recently about Nike, how a huge amount of the effort in their last years was not in the product development, but rather in how to build a better connection with the clients.
Hmm.
And so, Nike, also Apple, these are reasons why they pulled out of, say, Amazon. The
Right.
they don't sell on Amazon anymore because they want to control the way they communicate with their clients. And
Yeah. It's an emotional response, and to the degree that I can, I try to create an emotional response with my work and with the relationships, because it gets to be personal. Once you have a few projects under your belt, you go through the trenches with these people, and you come out the other side, having these bonds.
yeah, yeah, together.
Um, exactly. Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
guess the other thing I would say just really quickly is that starting out, keeping your overhead as low as absolutely possible.
Mm,
Really, I mean, I think right now it's worse than ever in terms of I need the latest plugin, or this asset or that. Really look at those things with an eye for, do I absolutely need it right now?
yes.
Put off those things as long as you can,
Yes, I
because
agree.
you can reinvest. Yeah.
I think it's a very good suggestion. Somebody once told me, when things get tough, reduce your costs and focus on sales as much as possible. But then
Yeah.
again, we have a situation where people might get confused and do things like lower the costs, or lower the prices for their
Right.
services, because they want to focus on selling more whilst
Hmm.
losing value, and also like creating more problems, right? Because in theory,
Absolutely.
a healthy company works better when they have the right amount of work and they get paid the right amount of money. And
Hmm.
instead, there are a lot of people that, in times like this, and it's understandable, because people go in panic mode, that they try um to get more work. They
Yeah.
try to get paid less because they want to make themselves appetible in front of the clients. And then what
Yeah.
happens is that they get more problems because more work means more problems.
Exactly. It's a false bargain. And um, I think the other real hardship that I had was the last downturn, 2008, 2009, where as an industry, we all had to charge less. There just became a culture of, well, this is how much renderings cost now. And there was so much pressure on all of us to reduce our rates. And I think we're a much stronger industry now. We can kind of push back, and we have the ability to do that. But there is still that temptation. And so, I think that's a really important thing to hear right now is to not drop your rates.
Mm.
Look at other ways of finding value. So the client comes and says, well, I can only spend X. They might have a preconceived notion. Oh, well, that means 4 renderings or 5 renderings or this or that. Look at ways of, if you can't do it for that amount of money, look at ways of reducing the scope. Like, let's do it for 3. Let's do 3 instead. Or, let's look at different ways of solving the problem that's at hand instead of let's give 5 renderings at half of what I would have charged, or cut on quality, or these things. So I would look at that really hard. And then the other thing I would say is offer added service. So if they're only getting 3 renderings, knowing that you might spend a little more time, offer another round of review, offer maybe a day and a night version of the same view, something like that, where you're still getting covered for the work that you're doing, and you're not creating the impression with your client that they're getting a bargain. Because they get that impression, it's going to be really hard to claw your way back out.
Yes. I think it's the key here, it's to be able to optimize and to be able to look at yourself, look at the numbers, and say, I can do this, and this will give me the chance to make my client a little bit more happy. I think one of the biggest issues with all the conversations that we continuously have over these social medias is that people get the information and they say, okay, one image is 1,000, whatever. I'll
Sure.
stick to it, and I do not optimize. The client wants an extra image, it's another extra 1,000.
Hmm.
Instead, I think this is, like where people make the mistake. Always optimize. Think of like the client interest is the first most important thing. But if this is stepping on your own toes and you're left to kill
Yeah.
yourself to make the client happy, is that still correct?
You take a pass. Yeah. If you have to.
Let me go
Um,
back a little
yeah,
bit to what you said about
for sure.
2008, 2009.
Yeah.
What did it take to you to get out of that crisis?
Well, I had to drop my rates. I could only charge about half of what I was charging prior. And there are a lot of reasons for that. And I think that having gone through it, I think I'm better equipped to manage it now. But at the time, that was just the reality. And so the way I approached it was, I need to survive. If I'm going to continue to do ArchViz, what I need to do to make money at this price point is do them in half the time. If I'm going to get half the money, I need to do it much more quickly. And so I just pared my workflow down to the bone. And um, say mid 2000s, I was creating all of the 3D models for all the renderings from scratch. Um, by the time we get to 2010, I'm getting a lot of 3D models from my clients. Instead of rebuilding them, I was able to figure out a workflow where I could use whatever they had in whatever quality it was, even, because there are some terrible models, but I figured out a way to just work over the top of it without getting my hands too dirty, and just get in and get out very quickly with a rendering. Um, and so that sort of got me through that downturn. But I would say it was tough kind of climbing back out, trying to get the rates back up to where they were. It took a very long time as a result.
So let me ask you another question. Looking
Yeah.
back to the way you handled that crisis, with the
Yeah.
knowledge that you have today, what would you do
Yeah.
different?
Well, I think I would have pushed back even harder on the drop in the rates. Probably pushed harder on, we were talking about sales, doing a better job of just explaining my own situation. I'm a business just like you. You have pressures that are causing you to ask for more than what you used to, and I have my own pressures, and so let's find maybe some more common ground,
Yeah.
and not have it be maybe so top down, more collaborative. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities to do that. When I first get started with a project, to talk about pulling the curtain back, be what is why are they calling you for this project? What's the problem that they have that needs to be solved? And what do we have to work with in terms of time, money, etc.? What's the best solution given all of those things? And a lot of times clients will come to you with a predetermined solution already in mind. And so I think what you can do is kind of push back. And I think it's something that I've gotten a lot better at over the years. But at that time, if I feel like if I had pushed back, been a little bit more creative in some of the problem solving at that time, it may not have taken quite so long to get the fees back up, but a lot of houses were wiped out, and I wasn't, so it's not all bad.
Do you think that also the fact that you were on your own helped you that
I think
way?
so. Yeah.
Because, and it might seem obvious for a lot of people, but actually, there are artists that say, well, if I'm on my own during a time of crisis, it's more likely that I'm going to die as a business because I'm on my own and I don't have the help and support of like a team. And so, there is another
Yeah.
face to the same coin, right?
Oh, for sure. I think there are pros and cons to both, and there are different challenges. I think when it's just you, uh, you can afford to cut out the office. You can afford to look at other ways of reducing your overhead. If you have a team, and you start making those decisions, they start affecting other people too, and then you start to have some other dynamics at work, and it can be it can be a real spiral if it's not managed well. So to be really careful with that as well.
Let me ask you, how is your workflow changed over the years, and what are some of the things that you were able to optimize that really made your life so much easier when dealing with projects?
Well, I think uh, what I've done over the years is I've sort of gone where the work has taken me, and I had definitely had a phase where I was getting a lot of non-photorealistic work, so a lot of kind of quote unquote digital watercolor work, and that was real bread and butter for a number of years. And so when we were talking about the last downturn, um, that's most of the work that I was doing at that time was kind of the digital watercolor. And so I, just like I said, it was like at that time it was SketchUp and Photoshop. That's it. Super simple. Um, now obviously some of the same clients, they have different needs, and obviously capabilities have gotten to the point where photorealistic work is attainable very quickly and obviously very commercially viable. So I had to change my workflow again, to be able to do that, do it as quickly as kind of people expect and as quickly as I expect to be able to do things. And So it's never ending. I think you always have to be honing that workflow, um, getting keeping the quality up, keeping the creativity up, um, and still make it all end. To make the ends meet at the end of the day.
How many times did you have to reinvent yourself during these 20 years from a
Sure.
technological point of view? Like you said to me that, for a very long time, SketchUp and Photoshop was, the base. You
Hmm.
must have gone to Max at one point. You must have gone
Yep.
to V-Ray or Corona. How
Yep.
many times did you have to do that, and how hard was it?
Yeah.
Because that's another thing that you hear people saying. I'm too old to
It's
learn something new. Or
Oh yeah, for sure. It's hard.
how
I mean,
how
when I was
young are you, by the way?
oh geez, I just turned 50.
Okay, congratulations.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So so I spent a lot of years building an AutoCAD, and I still have a copy. It's still my go-to for certain things. If I just want to bang something out. Um, so when I very, very first started, this is even before SketchUp, it was AutoCAD and AccuRender. That's how old I am. And then I had Cinema 4D phase for a while, and then SketchUp was starting to be widely adopted, a lot cheaper, so that was pretty attractive at the time. Jumped, and I picked up a copy of Max Design back when there was two versions of Max, and have kind of been with it for 10, 12 years now. Um, off and on, but I'd say the last 5 years I'm pretty much all Max. So it never changed. I mean, and then of course we're talking about real-time rendering and all these new
That
tools.
was my
So
next question.
yeah.
Because
So
now
I
there
think
is another mutation.
I think that's just as big a change as going from the drafting board to AutoCAD is going from Max to something like Unreal Engine. Um, just in terms of the not just the workflow, but just the headspace and how you problem solve. I mean, it's fundamental.
And what pushed you towards real time at the moment?
I think it's just the quality. I think just seeing the high level of quality that is possible out of it. I think that's what held me back from doing a lot of photo real work. When I was first getting started, was that I felt like it's still, the computer work still had this patina of glossy, plasticky look to it, and it took so much work to kind of get over that hurdle, that sort of uncanny hurdle, right? And I think that real time has had that problem for a number of years as well. And I think we're just within, say, the last year or two, gotten to the point where I mean, there's beautiful work being done, and it has all this other, the other potential, the other usefulness.
Doesn't it make your workflow a little bit slower though?
Well, that's what I'm working on right now. Trying to, cut all the corners I can without sacrificing quality. So right now, with the downtime, I'm looking at some older projects and taking them into Unreal, taking bits of them into Unreal because it's a smaller scope. You can't take a skyscraper into Unreal and expect to walk through the whole thing. At least I can't. So I'm looking at like just a lobby, something like that. And how do I get that to look to the same level of quality that I'm used to, but be able to walk around and be immersed in the space? There are a lot of ways of doing that, and I think we're just starting to figure it out as an industry, and I think our clients are just starting to figure it out, um, and with their level of expectation. So we have to stay up with that as well.
Let me ask you, how are you learning these new tools? Do you do it on your own? Are you hiring somebody to teach you? YouTube? How is it working?
Well, it's just on my own. I haven't hired anybody, at least not yet. There is I mean, it's overwhelming. There's so much resources out there. There's so many videos to watch. I can't keep up with them. But I think for me, I learn by doing. And so what I do is I take something that I know, and so that's why it's been useful to take some of the other projects. It's like I know exactly what that wood should look like, or exactly what this room should feel like. I've already sort of been there in my mind, when I was doing stills, and so I can. So I just learned by just banging on it, making it break, and then putting the pieces back together.
It's to me one of the things that surprising. It's probably the wrong word, but anyway, you'll see now in Epic Games or even the other one, Unity. All
Uh-huh.
these real-time engines, they now give you huge amounts of like already made materials. You find a lot of assets. It kind of reminds me like the first days of V-Ray, where people
Hmm.
had no clue how to make a wood. Like
Yeah.
the majority of people would just put a picture of a wood and you'll see like the tiling and everything. And so it kind of makes me, it
Or
reminds me of the fact that, like those were the first steps. So, it also makes me think that this is just the beginning, at least
I
for,
think so
those
too.
tools.
Yeah, I think it's easy to start with a lot of prepackaged assets, and then you look around and like, well, why is everybody using the same? Why do all these woods look the same? Oh, because it's the one that ships with Unreal, or this one that ships with V-Ray. It took a while. Obviously you need to be able to customize it. I mean, that's what we do. Is we have every project's different. Every building's a little different. So you have to be able to tweak it.
I remember I was working as a architectural assistant in 2006, and that
Uh-huh.
was around the time that SketchUp started to explode. And
Yeah.
every single planning application from any architect in London was done with a SketchUp image, and you'll be like, you are like,
Hmm.
every building looks the same in London because of all the assets that people could find in the or looking around.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I ran into that at the same time as well. And so I can't tell you how many clients like had come to me and say, we're in a competition, or even more comments like we're up for design review. The board is so sick of seeing SketchUp screenshots. Can you just help us dress it up even a little bit? Sure, no problem. And how much money they saved by just spending a little bit more time on those graphics rather than having to go through design review all over again.
Yeah.
It's you talk about the value that our industry brings. It's in moments like that.
I think a lot of us really underestimate the value that we add to
Hmm.
projects, not only architectural projects, but also like just imagine a brand like BMW selling their cars without the proper marketing material, right?
Yeah.
And I think that this is also one of those things that some of the artists fail to understand, that it's not only about presenting an architecture project, it's also about the branding value that you give to the company that hires you
Hmm.
for those images, because then that company can use your beautiful work, of course, if it's beautiful, to
Yep.
go to other clients and say, look, we
Yeah.
produce quality architecture.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are kind of three ways of looking at how you charge. One is how much does it cost you to produce the art, and the second one is how much does the market typically bear for the rendering, or the service that you're doing, and the third is what sort of value are you bringing to your client.
Yeah.
And when when I get pushback on, oh, it seems so expensive, I tend to fall back on the value argument. Like, what is the value of that the renderings are going to bring, or that the service that we're doing is going to bring to just not just to the immediate problem, but to your larger
Yeah.
problems that you have. This starts to change minds.
That is something that lies in the way you communicate, though, with people, right?
Yes.
In your
Yeah. You
own
have to be really careful. Yeah. Good.
in
Good.
your own specific case, how do you think has the way you communicate changed over the years? What are things that you have learned? What are things that you now treasure, that you use, that you know that are going to trigger those mechanisms in the head of your clients that are going to make them say, yes, let's try?
Yeah. Well, I think that, you learn by doing them the wrong way first, right? Um, but yeah, I think when I was first starting, it was really hard to say no. I think that there's a lot of power in saying no to something and not coming across as desperate. And so I think that, by now I can, negotiate with a little more strength and having a deeper portfolio, you can push back on some of the arguments. Oh, well, let's say this one will do at a discount, but the next one I'll get you covered. You get all these kinds of games going, and you're like, no, actually, I'm not really interested in that. And I think that you can say, well, I can see where you're coming from, but I can explain to you why that might not work well. Why don't we consider this instead? And I think that having gone through that a few times, you have a little bit more credibility. It can be difficult without that experience to make an argument like that. So I certainly benefit from being able to tap into those experiences.
Let me ask you one question, and feel free to share your
Yeah,
most honest, clean
yeah,
opinion on this topic. I always recommend, especially the younger people, to get a job before going freelance, before going solo, because a lot of those guys, they come from a situation where they did some renderings at university, and so somebody hires them from there. So they start their business without a lot of experience, and then they make a lot of mistakes that they drag through their career for sometimes a lot of years. And I
yeah,
say this because of the way the market looks like today. Don't get me wrong. Maybe
yeah,
10 years ago, you had a little bit of room to make those mistakes and to fix them. But as of now, still feels to me a little bit of like crazy thinking of like trying to create a business without clients, without money, without experience. What is your take on this? And honestly, you can contradict me. I'll be very happy to hear a contradicting opinion in case you have one. I'm
Oh,
not
not
telling
yet.
you to do that though.
Yeah, I think it's important to develop good habits. Such creatures of habit, especially if we're talking about freelancers, it's really easy to develop bad habits and not even be aware of them, and to have them be perpetuated. The longer you do that, the harder it is to break out of that. But I think to your question, I think it's really important to have some outside experience. Um, so I studied engineering, and I had many years of working in different architectural offices. I worked in the entertainment industry for a while. So there were a lot of things that I had already seen before I made that leap. And so I think I mentioned earlier, it's like I already knew what my clients were expecting. And I think that can be a really hard thing. It'd be kind of an abstract thing if you don't have that kind of real world practical experience from the get go. So yeah, I think architecture school is a great preparation, but I think a year or two even of working in an architectural office, being able to read plans and have a sense of how buildings are put together will really inform the art that you end up creating later on.
You worked in the entertainment industry. What did you do exactly?
I was a theater designer, so I did IMAX theaters and also oh boy, what are they called? They're like it's a dated thing, but it's like the motion seats where you sit in and that moves in sync with the movie, like kind of kind of theme park attractions.
All right.
So we designed like a lot of the the theming that would go along with the rides, and like World's Fair kind of installations, things like that. Um, Trial by fire. It was an awesome experience. I mean, 100-hour weeks, but yeah, I mean, I learned so much in such a short period of time.
Let me ask you, because you
Yeah.
touched a little bit on the fact that architecture school, it's a great course, and I
Mhm.
agree. I think that during that time I was given the chance to learn real problem solving,
Yeah.
creative problem solving. Um, in retrospective, when you look at the education that you received, are there topics that you wished your teachers covered, or that in a way made a little bit more important about the education that a designer needs in order to become also a successful professional?
Oh, yeah. I think this is a problem throughout all university. It's like they just don't really prepare you for the business world. I graduated uh, 91, and it took me about 3 years before I had my first real opportunity in an office. I mean, there was just the college didn't really do a very good job of preparing us for the real world in that regard. But I think architecture school in particular is a great experience to have for lots of different professions, because it teaches you problem solving in a very direct way. And so I think a lot of people go to architecture schools, end up being really disappointed that they don't end up being an architect. Very few do. And I think that's okay, because it's because that problem solving skill it translates into so many other industries.
I totally agree. I think that all those memes that they make about being an architect or being an architecture student, in a way they're all real, because
Yeah.
when you get out of architecture school, you're like a soldier without weapons, but with a very ready head to go like into the field and solving issues. A few years back, I did some design sprints. I don't know if you know what design sprints are. They're basically these
No, not
exercises.
exactly. Yeah.
These are exercises that make you think of like how to create a product or a service, and how to sort of like go through the design process, testing process, and go to market process. And it's crazy to see how many architects are involved in these design thinking sprints, design sprints. Um, because eventually, like business is a process, and a lot of problems, they get solved in a creative way. They don't get solved in a mathematical, Excel sheet kind of way.
Sure.
And so I really I tell a lot of young people, if you're confused and you know that you're an artist or that you like to do creative things, architecture is not a bad choice. If you see how
No.
many people went from architecture to study to work in the film industry, directors, game designers.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think that there's a lot of disappointment that comes with it, though. And I think that one of the things, at least my experience, like architecture school tends to build you up, because there is a God complex associated with architecture, and so you definitely pick up on that. You absorb it, and the kind of the school environment, and then you get out and you're like, here's some toilets that we need detailed. Let's see what you come up with.
But it's like one might think that this has only to do with the architecture school. I guarantee you, you
Oh
study
yeah.
law, you study medicine. I hear these stories all the time.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
People that, study 10 years to become lawyers, and then they have to sort the post in the post room, because this is part of their first 2 years of professional practice.
Yeah, and a lot more years of study. I imagine it's a shock. I think no matter what. So uh,
Scott, let me ask you,
Yeah.
how does your future look like right now, professionally speaking?
Yeah, thanks. So we've talked sort of offline about this. I have been looking at partnering up with other studios, trying to, just get back involved with bigger projects. The scope of ArchViz has changed. And so, 10 years ago, I was able to work on Hudson Yards as a freelancer. And it was amazing. A project like that comes along today, they're not hiring freelancers. They're going to big rendering houses because that's where our industry is. And big rendering houses didn't exist, to the degree that they do now. So anyway, I've made a connection with a company in London, Arco, and so we have been working on different strategies for sharing work, both directions. I can provide kind of some client experience and art direction experience, and kind of offload a lot of the production that I'm currently doing. So we're still kind of getting all that figured out, and of course we got shut down right in the middle of all of this. But I had a chance to go to London like in February, so right before, yeah. And we had a lot of really great meetings, and I think there's a really great potential there. I'm super excited. We've been doing, chats and things as best we can to stay in touch. And we're still looking for, we've done a lot of little things. We're looking for that first real big project to break. And I think it'll be real soon.
Scott, believe it or not, we've been talking for almost an hour.
Oh my God.
Time flies, I know.
It does. I love it.
It's nice, right? Um, let's address the young people that are watching this and they might be
Yeah.
interested in having a long, successful career and maybe
Mm-hmm.
walk the same steps that you walked. What are some of the recommendations that you can give those younger people that are really trying to make it on their own? They want to go freelance and they're ready to do whatever it takes to do this.
No, it's a great question. I think it's funny. When I started, there wasn't even the notion of ArchViz as a career. It was a hobby, for a long time, and then it turned into a hobby that I got to do full time. So I didn't even really consider it a career. When I first started, I had no idea how long I would. Oh, maybe I get to do this for a year or two, and like that'll be fun, and then I'll go back. So I think, to be honest, I think it's important to have a fallback because it may not work, and it's certainly not for everyone.
Can you
But
please explain
yeah,
what a fallback is?
of course. Plan B. It's I had already had some professional experience in an architecture firm, so if the freelancing didn't work out, if I just couldn't make it work, then I could interview and go back to a different firm, and I had that option. And I think that it's important to have other options in case this doesn't work, because, and I've seen a lot of it, it's not for everyone. A lot of freelancers just find it to be too much. It's just a struggle, or it's just they don't have the right personality. It can be lonely at times, because it's just you. You do have to work. I started in New York. I had a bunch of projects where we never met face to face. It's all over the phone, emails. I had one client I had worked with for 5 or 6 years. When we finally met in person, it's like, I had no idea what you looked like. So it can be weird. So I think, prepare yourself for that. You mentioned some of the, if you're starting out in a different country, then, it kind of prepare for just kind of doing your own thing, for a while. But I guess the other advice I would say is walk before you run. You do take on small things, hone them, get really good. Don't just jump right into a really big project and expect to have it all figured out, and be making money and have it be, award-winning art, all at once. It's going to take time.
Scott, I want to thank you for taking the time. This was very insightful. I
Oh,
really hope that I was
oh, I
able to
hope so.
contribute to this conversation because, you're a man with a lot of experience. I've had the luck
Oh,
to meet you in person. Um, I was really humbled by the way you are as a person. Um, it's not a coincidence that you managed to run your business for so long because there is something special about you. And
oh,
I don't know, I'm just very honored that you decided to take the time and talk to me.
oh, you bet, Fabio. Thank you so much. It's great to talk to you again. It was a thrill to meet you last year. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed our conversations and kind of reflect upon them after the fact. I feel like made a friend, and I love that. If anything, you've been even more active these days.
Yeah.
So
I've
I
been
can see
bothering
more of that.
people with my videos.
It's awesome. I love it.
Scott, don't go
Uh,
anywhere. Thanks a lot for talking to me. I'm gonna stop the stream. If people
okay.
want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I guess you can post it in the link, just my email and my website, Baumberger Studio, and then also arko.london. That's my partner. So yeah, love to hear any questions. Love to help out in any way I can. There weren't very many mentors when I was getting started because we didn't really have an industry.
Yeah.
So it'd be really cool to be able to help in any way I can.
Scott, don't
Thank
go
you so much.
anywhere. My pleasure, man. I'm gonna stop the stream so that I can say
Okay.
goodbye one more time.
All
Thanks a lot
right.
for doing this, man.
Oh, thank you.